Okay, for custom streaming service. I don't know what that happens. It doesn't always go like this. Check. I'm trying to put on live. Okay.
It says you're in practice, Kai.
I'm not in practice. Hold on a second.
Just hold on. If you put it on streaming.
Yeah, no, just
How's it, Dobby? How are you? Just
Good,
quickly
how
go.
you doing?
Quickly go. No, don't start.
Why?
Because you don't want to be in streaming service.
Right.
No, you don't.
I thought you always want to do.
Not on this thing.
We always do. Every single week.
Huh?
We always do every
This
single
thing?
week. Yeah.
On my Facebook.
Yeah. Always. That's what I was taught to do. That's what we do.
This is not the Wednesday night show.
This is.
Oh, sorry.
It's Wednesday
Sorry.
night, yeah.
I thought this was your Thursday night show.
No, those aren't finished.
Okay. I'm going a bit nuts. Okay,
What do you think?
I think you've started.
I mean, is it slow on? Is it slow?
Well, yeah, you're on. You're on Facebook. You're on everything.
Stop.
Let's go.
Okay. Welcome and thank you for joining our pirkei avos Nishmat Rab Avraham Chaim ben Eliezer Yaakov Zecher Tzadik Livracha and Goldie Miriam ben Avraham Chaim Zechrona Livracha. May they both intercede on high on behalf of all of us. Over to you, Dov.
Thank you, Kai. Hello, all. Welcome to another Mishnah. Pirkei, Mishnah Vav or Zion, depending on the text. It's a short Mishnah, so maybe we'll have a shorter shir, but let's see how it goes. Avu ra'a gugoles achas. Hillel, the elder, once saw a skull, shetzafa al panei hamayim, that was floating on the water. Amar lo, and he spoke to the skull, he addressed the skull. He said, Al da'ateft atafuch, because you drowned others, Rachmana litzlan, atafuch, that's why you were drowned. V'soif metaya faich, in the end, those who drowned you, yetufun, they too will be drowned. That's it. It's a short Mishnah. It is teaching us an amazing lesson, which we'll discuss. The lesson that you've got to have a long view in life. You've got to have a vision and a memory. That's what he's saying. He saw something shocking in front of him, a skull floating on the water before him, and to him, it conjured up an entire history. The interesting thing is that in the previous Mishnah, which was also Hillel, he spoke about the midas of developing a learning personality, a learning and teaching personality, the formulation of relationships of a human being. Remember, he had 6 levels, from a bur to an amaretz, to a lomed, a student, to a melamed, a teacher, to a chacham, a wise person. These are, each one is a different relationship, as we spoke. And now he says, Afu, he too, he also saw the following and commented on it. It almost sounds like it's a continuation of the previous Mishnah. And perhaps the previous Mishnah was talking about one's immediate relationships, people who one works with, people who one learns from, people who you teach, scholars, colleagues. And now he's saying there's a broader network of relationships. He says our relationships do not end with the people who we're directly involved. He says, in fact, there's a network, a web of relationships out there, which is broader and more complex than we could possibly imagine. And that's what he's addressing. So he saw a skull. He too, almost extension of the relationships. He saw the skull and he spoke to it. Why on earth will he speak to the skull? Seems to me that Hillel didn't want to just formulate this as a theoretical rule. What comes around goes around. What goes around comes around. Didn't want to preserve it for the Jewish people that way. He wanted it to be a real-time event, a conversation, almost a dialogue with the Messias, with the fact of life. So he saw the skull and he formulated a principle of life around the skull. So that imagery, that shocking imagery, will convey its own sheer forever. It's a different dynamic, the sheer that he gave, having seen the skull and spoken to it. People often think that they're independent actors on the stage of life. We do what we want, as we want, and it's our world. And that we act in a vacuum, we kid ourselves. And Hillel says, of course, you have bechira, but you have no bechira to hurt anyone. You cannot hurt anyone, and no one can hurt you. That only comes about through the Yad of Hashem. This is nigzar min hashamayim. So when he addressed this skull, he said, it's not just what happened to you. So there was first a gezeira min hashamayim. And because of that, and that gezeira min hashamayim happened because Hashem's ratzon was for such a thing to happen. Now he says to the skull, you were a murderer. Truth is, he didn't have to say that because the rule works even if it wasn't a murderer. Simply that it was the ratzon of Hashem. You can't say that every time one sees a murder, chas v'sholom, that the person was chas v'sholom. No. But Hillel knew that this one was. So he formulated his conversation, his principle, around a full picture. That the cycle goes round and what you did to others is coming back to haunt you. But it doesn't have to be that way. According to the Ari HaKodesh, actually, this skull was actually the skull of Paro. Paro, who tried to drown the Jews, as we saw in Yisro, Parshas Yisro, it says the Egyptians tried to drown the Yidden. And how did it eventuate? What was the consequences? What was the end of the story? The Egyptians all drowned. It didn't have to be that they drowned, because Baruch had any number of ways of solving the final solution of the Egyptian people, to use a terrible expression. He chose the water because of this principle. This was the principle, the Hillel principle. What you did to others is going to be done to you. And therefore be careful. But he told it to us through this conversation with the skull. It wasn't only on a national scale of kings and armies and countries. Even one individual skull. He said in the same conversation. But they still will get punished. Hillel wasn't saying that the people who drowned this skull will now, because they were doing the message of Hashem, won't get punished. Of course they're going to get punished. Because even though there was a gezeira on this person, this skull, the gezeira didn't say that they had to do it. The way they did it was a gezeira on him. There's a rule. Megalgelin zechus alidei zakai, megalgelin choiva alidei chaya. Hashem uses evil people, bad people, to carry out negative consequences that he wants. He very seldom, if ever, uses a good person to visit punishment on somebody else. He uses good people to bring reward to others, to bring benefit to others. He very seldom. So in this Mishnah, Hillel said, look what's happened over here. This skull did something bad, and therefore it was done to him. And it will be done to those people. Why were those people used? Because they were bad, because they needed it to happen to them. And that's why, since they needed it to happen to them, they were brought into the picture that it should happen through them. So if a person spends his life looking for ways to help people, Hashem uses such people as an instrument of bracha. And chas v'shalom, the opposite, is also true. And even though a person who goes out of his way to help people is also only a shaliach, he can't really help people. This is a fundamental rule of emunah. No one can bring you any benefit unless Hashem has ordained it, and they cannot harm you in any way unless Hashem has ordained it. So the shaliach, the person who brings it into fruition, is only a shaliach. He doesn't deserve punishment, so to speak, or reward. That's not the way it works. If he does, he will be rewarded as though it was him bringing about the benefit, and the cycle continues on the positive as well. It's a great question. Why did Hillel formulate it in the negative? He could have said the exact inverse of the message. He could have seen somebody winning a lottery and said, you know, you were good to people, and that's why. I don't have an answer for that, but let's think about it. The Ramban adds that even though Klal Yisrael had to go into Godus, and therefore you should say, Paro, you shouldn't be punished. Of course he'll be punished. Because nobody told which Egyptian to be involved in, and how much they should add in on their own. Nebuchadnezzar was called Avdi, my slave, my servant. He was carrying out Hashem's will. Still he'll get punished. Because Hashem only used them to bring consequences negative because they deserve the punishment. It's the exact inverse. Because they deserve punishment, that's why Hashem used them to bring about misery. Chas v'shalom, if they kill an innocent man, we can't understand everything. We would never say to such a person, it was because of what he did. We're not Nevi'im. We're not even Chachamim, historically speaking. But it was part of Hashem's plan. That's all we know. And the people who did it were used to do that because they're evil people. And because they're going to get schmutz. That's why Hashem used them. This is the formulation Hillel taught us. There's broader relationships going on with people we don't know, we'll never meet. It is a web. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's a perfect system. Because you drowned others, you were drowned. Not only the capital punishment, it's saying the way it happened, the drowning, even. The fact that this person wasn't zoche to a kever, that his skull was floating on the water, that too is a precise result. Hillel is formulating the world is an absolutely perfect, unified system. It's a unified system. No energy, we know scientifically, we learned it in high school, no energy, no matter can ever be destroyed. You can't destroy energy, you can't destroy matter. It transforms, it moves around within the cosmos. It can never be lost, can never be destroyed. You may not be able to find it, but it's there. Kol shekain in spiritual terms, nothing is ever lost, not a thought that we think, certainly not a word and not a deed is ever lost from the system. Everything is producing results all the time. This is the Hillel principle. This is what Hillel is teaching us. Morality, like in the law of thermonuclear dynamics, I think that's the way they say it, for every reaction is an equal and opposite reaction. And that's just the fact of life. The Rambam writes it in our Mishnah. He writes something stunning. I'd like to actually read it to you. You know, we don't usually read the classics inside, but listen to this Rambam in this Mishnah. He said, you can test this. You can actually see it if you keep your eyes open. Wherever you are, whenever you are, you can see that this rule is ironclad. It's like one of the physical rules, inviolable, like gravity. It's just there. Shekomi sheyaseh ra. Anybody who brings harm to people. He introduces harm into the world. He himself will be harmed by what he has done. The opposite is also true. Somebody who introduces positivity into the world. He introduces kindness. He brings about benefit to people. He introduces some good to some people, to someone. Yagi'ehu to'eles hapor alahu. He will benefit from that self-same kindness. If he digs wells to give people who are thirsty to drink, he will benefit, or his children will benefit from that. And that's a physical law. The Rambam says it's a rule of nature, ironclad. You can test it anytime. Incredible. And even more so kindness, because midah toiva merubah midah puranos is much more powerful. The positive, the virtuous cycle is far more powerful than the vicious cycle. And it's in Olam Hazeh, the Rambam says. Don't have to wait to Olam Haba. It's in Olam Hazeh. I actually thought maybe this is a possible pshat in the pasuk. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. We know it's famous pasuk. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your fellow as yourself. What do you mean? Do for him as you would want. That's what the Rambam says it means. It doesn't mean emotion of love. It means do for him, act for him as you would want to act for yourself. And perhaps part of the pshat is you are doing for yourself. Act in the best interest of your friend, as if it was for yourself. What would you want in that situation? Because you are. What goes around comes around. One touch in the pasuk. The pasuk concludes, Ani Hashem. Hashem says, I'm able to give you as much kindness as I see you doing. So do it, so I can do it. But according to Abshat, as you are, as you're doing for yourself, because you are in fact doing for yourself. Remember, this is the famous Hillel in the Gemara in Shabbos, when he was pushed by the Ger who said, Gaireni, as long as you can teach me the whole Torah al regal achas. So I'm standing on 1 foot, and Shammai drew him out with a builder's plumb. Hillel taught him. He said, I can crystallize the entire Torah for you into one rule. Do you remember what was Hillel's rule? Ta'alach sani, what is hateful to you, lechavrach l'sami. What you don't want, don't do to somebody else. But listen to it. It's that cycle. What you do not want done to yourself, don't do to others. In other words, because if you do it to others, it's coming back to you. He says, just keep your eyes open and see. That's why. And he said the rest of the whole Torah is commentary. Hilchos Lulav is commentary to that halakha. What goes around comes around. Hilchos Paraduma is commentary. Hilchos Shabbos, it's all commentary. Hillel said to that one fundamental principle which is highlighting in our Mishnah. Don't do to others what you don't want done. In other words, implicit in that, because what you do to others is coming back to you. Incredible. There's the famous story of the Chafetz Chaim, that one wintry night in Radin, a lot of snow, the winds were howling, and in the howling of the wind you could hear a terrible, maniacal howling of a Yid, a Jewish man who unfortunately had been bitten by a rabid dog, a rabid dog, and he had lost it. And he was out in the cold, howling like a werewolf. And when the Chafetz Chaim heard it, the aged Chafetz Chaim, his response was meant to be, it's said to be, he nodded, and he says, I remember 50 years ago, a night like tonight, a freezing cold night with snow like they only know in the north. And he said, I remember there was Nebuch and Almana and Yesomim who turned out they were evicted from their apartment because they couldn't pay the rent. But they were evicted on a night like this, driven into the street by this man. The Chafetz Chaim said, Shat in the Mishnah, soif mitafayich itafum. Hashem has a timetable that we don't always see. Soif, he says, keep your eyes open. I remember Dad used to tell the story, and this is what he said. Soif, you gotta keep your eyes open for 50 years sometimes longer. But you'll see the system works. The system does work. There's a lovely story I came across in this avos. My brother-in-law dedicated to our dad. And it says as follows: there was once an elderly man whose son didn't care for him properly. He left him instead to live in the hektish, the poor people in the city. One cold winter day, the old man was sitting with his poor friends, and lo and behold, he sees his Einikel, his grandson, walk past. And he called him and said, "Ranke, do me a favor, he said, I'm freezing, please go and tell your Abba," which is his son, "please send me some warm clothing to protect me from this weather. I'm not managing." He was getting older. The grandson went home. He told his Abba. The father said to him, "Okay, go up to the attic and you'll see there's an old coat hanging on a hook. Take that coat and take it back to your grandfather." The son climbed up to the attic where he found hanging on the hook a very old, worn-out garment that had more holes on it than the actual cloth. He was very upset and disturbed by the way his father was treating his grandfather. And he came down and he had torn the coat in half. He came down carrying the half the garment. His father said, "Why did you do that? Why did you cut the garment in half? Why did you cut the coat? Why don't you take it to Zayda?" So the son said, "I'm saving the other half for you when you get old, and I send you to live in the hektish. You're going to have the rest of this coat for yourself." But that's the rule. This is the Hillel rule. And as we related from the Gemara in Shabbos, Hillel, this rule was the kernel, the crystal of Kol HaTorah Kula. Soif, what you don't want done, don't do, because life is a perfect system. We have absolute emunah. What goes around is coming around. We just have to have a long view sometimes. But ultimately, life is a matter of relationships that we can't even dream that we have. But they're real and they come back. Be'ezat Hashem, the power of good, many hundreds of times, the Gemara says, more powerful than this. Every bit of good that a person can do, the person does, it's the Rambam, inevitably, inexorably, it's going to come back to him again and again. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
Brilliant, Borat. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.